John Deere reacting tonight, the company, after a reaction after former President Donald Trump.
Tonight, many of America's farmers already feeling the pinch are worried about the possibility of more challenges.
An American farmer is facing potential problems because of the president. We are talking about Trump's tariffs and the trade wars. And as we look at the Dow right now in real time, here's your headline.
$50 million in crop losses, 1.7 million acres paralyzed, all because America's tractors never arrived. In the heart of America's farm belt, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, over 1.7 million acres of cropland are sitting idle. Not because of weather, not because of disease, but because the machines farmers rely on simply never showed up. Across these states, local cooperatives estimate at least $50 million in lost yields this season alone. The reason: John Deere moved part of its production to Mexico. And while the shift only affected a small fraction of manufacturing, the disruption hit at the worst possible moment right in the middle of planting and early harvest season. Farmers placed orders. The equipment was supposed to arrive. It didn't. Parts were delayed at the border. Tractors sat in warehouses waiting for software updates. And in some cases, mechanics refused to service machines without official diagnostics locked behind Deere's proprietary systems.
If you do that, we're putting a 200% tariff on everything that you want to sell into the United States, so that if I win, John Deere is going to be paying a 200%.
Then came the political firestorm. Donald Trump, furious over the Mexico move, threatened a 200% tariff on Deere's imports. That warning alone triggered massive delays at ports and inspection checkpoints. Containers full of machinery were detained. Thousands of acres were left without harvesters. In towns across the Midwest, farmers watched their fields not flood, not freeze, but stand still. Because in 2025, the most advanced agricultural economy in the world was stopped not by nature, but by a broken supply chain. And it's just the beginning. In June 2025, over 1.7 million acres of farmland across Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas went unharvested. Not because of drought or pests, but because the tractors never came. In Nebraska alone, farmers reported more than $50 million in crop losses due to missing equipment. Then came the political explosion. At a rally in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump threatened a 200% tariff on all John Deere machinery imported from Mexico, calling the company's move a betrayal of American workers. The consequences were immediate. U.S. Customs began detaining containers of farm machinery at border crossings. What was once a seamless trade route turned into a bureaucratic blockade. For farmers already racing against the harvest clock, this wasn't just policy, it was devastation. While fields in America sat untouched, John Deere was busy pouring $55 million into a new plant in Nuevo León, Mexico, quietly announced in Q2 2025 and scheduled to begin operations in 2026. The company insisted that the shift represents less than 5% of its total North American production. But on the ground, no one believed it. American farmers felt abandoned. Factory workers in Illinois and Iowa began to fear for their jobs, and union leaders accused Deere of hiding behind technicalities while laying the groundwork for long-term offshoring. Because in 2025, even a 5% shift feels like the start of a landslide. It didn't take long for the backlash to go political. At a rally in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump unleashed a direct attack on John Deere, declaring, "Anyone who supports John Deere is standing against America." His words echoed across the Midwest, not just as rhetoric, but as a warning. Within hours, Deere's stock dropped 1.5% in after-hours trading. Investors saw it not as bluster, but as policy in motion. And they weren't wrong. Behind the scenes, U.S. trade officials began drawing up contingency plans for a 200% tariff on all John Deere equipment imported from Mexico. That sent a chilling message to the entire manufacturing sector. Companies like Ford and Caterpillar, both exploring Mexico expansion, froze their plans immediately. Boardrooms from Detroit to Dallas began treating the tariff not as an exception but a precedent. One CEO told the Wall Street Journal, "If Deere gets hit, we're all on the list." In one speech, Trump had turned corporate relocation into a national loyalty test. And it worked. But tariffs weren't the only thing breaking down. Across the agricultural supply chain, the effects of Deere's move and the political firestorm that followed began to multiply. Equipment rental companies doubled their rates in June as machines grew scarce. Waiting lists for basic harvesters stretched into the fall. Even farmers who already owned machinery were paralyzed. John Deere's controversial software lockout policy, which prevents independent repairs, left countless tractors sitting idle. Minor breakdowns became weeks-long disruptions. The backlash intensified when the Federal Trade Commission (FTC) launched a formal lawsuit against John Deere, alleging it had violated right-to-repair protections. Internal documents cited in the case revealed that the company's repair policies had pushed average service costs up 41% since 2020. In practical terms, that meant farmers were paying more for repairs they could no longer do themselves on machines they couldn't even replace. What started as a manufacturing shift had become a full-blown supply chain crisis, where the consequences stretched far beyond equipment. In rural counties across the Midwest, grocery stores saw price spikes in fresh produce. Transporters couldn't schedule hauls. Even tomato harvests were delayed, all because one company disrupted the entire rhythm of American farming. And as John Deere's brand faded from loyalty to liability, the question changed. It was no longer, why did they leave? Now it's, can the system survive without them?
It's a little more than 40 days until the general election. Good evening, and thanks for watching tonight. At a rally in Pennsylvania this week, former President Donald Trump promised to hit John Deere with a 200% tariff on any products not made in the U.S. A tariff is...
While politicians traded threats and Deere executives held their line, America's farmers took the fight into their own hands. And they started in Colorado. In 2024, Colorado became the first state to pass a full right-to-repair law for agricultural equipment. The results were immediate average repair, wait times dropped by 30%. Farmers could finally access the software tools and diagnostics they needed without waiting for a certified Deere technician to drive out and charge $180 per hour. That one victory sparked a wildfire. By mid-2025, 11 other states, including Iowa, Illinois, and Nebraska, had introduced similar legislation. In state houses and agricultural commissions, the message was clear: the monopoly on machine maintenance was over. But the turning point came in Des Moines, Iowa, when hundreds of farmers gathered outside the Midwest Agricultural Futures Conference. Some held signs that read, "Unchain our tractors." Others carried their repair receipts, some topping $8,000 for a single service. They weren't just asking for a fix, they were demanding federal action. This was no longer a legal debate. It had become a national rebellion, a rural revolt against an industrial giant that farmers once called a partner. In the fields, they planted seeds. In the streets, they planted resistance. As the U.S. crisis deepened, pressure mounted not just at home, but across the border. Mexico, once a quiet trading partner, stepped into the chaos with three specific demands aimed at preventing a total breakdown of cross-border agricultural cooperation. First, Mexico called for guaranteed right to repair for U.S. farmers, knowing full well that any delay in American harvests would ricochet through Mexican food processors. If U.S. farmers couldn't fix their machines, Mexican production lines would stop next. Second, Mexico proposed a bilateral compensation fund designed to support farmers on both sides of the border affected by equipment shortages and price spikes. The idea: share the risk, stabilize the supply. Third, Mexico requested joint technology transfer agreements, especially for small and medium-sized growers. The goal: empower family farms to independently maintain machinery without relying on foreign service monopolies, American or otherwise. These weren't just diplomatic talking points, they were a warning. If the U.S. failed to stabilize its own agricultural backbone, Mexico would fully pivot toward Canadian and Argentine equipment suppliers. In other words, the clock was ticking, and the only thing more fragile than a tractor's sensor system was the trust of America's last remaining allies. While headlines focused on tractors and tariffs, the broader economic reality was quietly shifting, and not in America's favor. Today, over 60% of Fortune 500 companies maintain manufacturing operations in Mexico. From auto parts to semiconductor supply chains no longer stop at the Rio Grande, they cross it daily by truck, train, and fiber optic cable. Trump's 200% tariff threat wasn't just aimed at John Deere. It sent a warning shot through the entire North American supply ecosystem. Executives from Detroit to Silicon Valley began asking if they can weaponize trade overnight what's still safe. Even the Federal Reserve began to worry. Internal memos warned that prolonged equipment delays and harvest disruptions could drive up food prices, pushing the consumer price index higher and derailing America's fragile inflation control strategy. Because when tariffs spike, so do costs, not just for imports, but for groceries, fuel, and transport. And in a system this interconnected, the damage doesn't stop at the border. It rolls straight into every checkout lane in America. Under mounting political, public, and economic pressure, John Deere announced a sweeping $20 billion investment plan aimed at revamping U.S. infrastructure, advancing automation, and reinforcing domestic production capacity over the next decade. On paper, it's bold. It signals commitment. It's meant to silence critics. But for many Americans, especially those in the rural towns that have long lived and breathed green and yellow, the damage is already done. The tractors didn't show up when they were needed. The repairs didn't come on time. The harvests were missed. The silence wasn't filled by promises, it was filled by losses. In Nebraska and Iowa, farmers ask not what Deere plans for 2035, but where the machines were in May. In Illinois, machinists laid off from facilities near Moline want to know why the new jobs are going to Nuevo Leon. In Des Moines, Kansas City, and across the Midwest, people are asking the same thing. Is Deere still ours? Now the company stands at a historic crossroads. It can choose to double down on Made in USA, reinvest in the very communities that built its brand, and accept higher costs in the name of loyalty and legacy. Or it can continue chasing global efficiencies, shifting production, optimizing margins, and in doing so, risk losing the soul of an American icon. Because at this level, profit margins no longer tell the whole story. Trust does, symbolism does, loyalty does. And for a company whose tractors have stood in parades, been passed down across generations, and featured in country songs, brand identity isn't just a marketing tool, it's a contract with the American heartland. The stakes go beyond John Deere's balance sheet. This is now a national test of values of what kind of economy America wants to be. One that prioritizes short-term cost savings and multinational efficiency, or one that safeguards strategic industries, rewards domestic labor, and holds its icons accountable. From the factory floors of Waterloo, Iowa, to the new plants rising in Nuevo Leon, from Senate hearing rooms in Washington to the ballot boxes of Pennsylvania, the outcome of Deere's decision will ripple across decades. This isn't just a business dilemma. It's a referendum on American industrial identity. And whichever path John Deere chooses, the world will be watching. Will Trump's tariff war save American jobs or destroy the heart of U.S. agriculture? Let us know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated as we follow the fallout from this high-stakes political economic showdown.